There's something in the heart of God that He always wants to meet with His people. And that's exactly what He did in what we know of as the Tabernacle. My name is Chris Montgomery, pastor at Fraser Church, and thank you for joining us on this 8-week journey as we learn how to enter His presence.
Welcome to day 26 of the Tabernacle, an illustration of illumination. As the lampstand allowed priests to approach God, Christ came to get us out of spiritual darkness. As the lampstand shed light on the table of showbread, Christ is the light through whom we can all have fellowship with God. Our text today is from Numbers chapter 8, verses 1 through 4. Now the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to Aaron, and say to him, when you set up the lamps, the 7 lamps shall give light in front of the lampstand." And Aaron did so. He set up its lamps in front of the lampstand, as the Lord commanded Moses. And this was the workmanship of the lampstand, hammered work of gold. From its base to its flowers it was hammered work, according to the pattern that the Lord had shown Moses. So he made the lampstand. The authors of Preaching the Word commentary for Numbers discuss the relationship between the tabernacle's form and function in the following way. The relationship between form and function has been a classic debate. Which is more important, the shape of a building or the function that it has to serve? The same is true of God's perfectly designed building, the tabernacle. Everything in the tabernacle had a practical reason for existence. Everything had a function. At the same time, however, every piece of furniture also contributed in some distinct way to the larger message that the tabernacle was intended to convey. It had a particular form. If you focus entirely on the function of the furniture, you may miss the significance of its form and the message it was intended to convey. In the same way, the lampstand of the tabernacle had both form and function. It had a practical purpose to give light. There were no windows in the holy place, and there were thick, heavy curtains all around it. The priest who ministered day by day at the altar of incense and the table of the showbread needed to have some light to work by, and the lampstand provided that light. Yet the lampstand was never just a utilitarian light. They couldn't simply have replaced it with fluorescent tubes. It had a form that conveyed a message of its own, a message that comes to expression in the opening verses of Numbers chapter 8. Numbers chapter 7 ended with Moses meeting with the Lord in the tabernacle. God conversed with Moses from his invisible throne above the cherubim on the Ark of the Covenant, and Moses responded in verse 89. God was dwelling in the midst of his people, and the tabernacle had been inaugurated, and its operation was beginning exactly as God had commanded. As part of that inaugural instruction, God commanded Aaron to set up the 7 lamps on the lampstand in such a way that they faced forward and threw their light in front of the lampstand. The design for the lampstand had been given to Moses back in Exodus chapter 25. However, now that it was time for the lampstand to be put into action, God was insistent that the lamps should face forward and shed their light forward. What did the lampstand symbolize? It symbolized God Himself. That is why this piece of furniture was made out of pure gold, hammered into shape. You can see Numbers 8, verse 4. Unlike all the other objects in the holy place, which were made of wood and merely plated with gold, it had 7 lamps on it, symbolizing the completeness and perfection of God's presence. This symbolism is confirmed by the description of the function of the lampstand. It was to give light, exactly the same Hebrew word that the priestly blessing used of God's face shining upon His people. You can see Numbers 6, verse 25. The light of the lampstand thus represented God's favor or blessing shining out into the darkness. Where, though, does this light shine in Numbers 8? It is to shine forward on the area in front of the lampstand, upon the place where the table of the showbread stood. Again, this table had on it 12 loaves representing the offerings of the 12 tribes of Israel. That is surely why this note about the lampstand follows Numbers chapter 7, where all 12 of the tribes presented their offerings to the Lord, and the Lord accepted them. What we see in Numbers chapter 8, verses 1 through 4, is a visual metaphor. The light of the Lord rested upon all of the tribes of his people, making their offerings acceptable in his sight. God's love and acceptance of those who were his were both depicted at the very heart of the tabernacle. Therefore, the form and function of the tabernacle were both illustrations of illumination. God was shining his light on the 12 tribes of Israel so they could see his presence and know that by his light he would lead them. What the priest prayed as a blessing over the people, the lampstand of the tabernacle proclaimed as a daily reality. From Numbers 6, verses 24 through 26. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. Some questions to consider. How does the Bible's repetition of the description of the lampstand shine more light on its meaning? You can review Exodus 25, verses 31 through 40, Exodus 37, verses 16 through 24, Leviticus 24, 1 through 4, Numbers 8, 1 through 4, and Hebrews 9, verses 1 through 10. In what other ways does the form and function of the lampstand point to the light of Jesus Christ? What are your thoughts on the priestly prayer found in Numbers 6, verses 24 through 26, as it relates to the tabernacle? Thank you for joining us. Have a great day.